Please welcome Etgar Lefkovits.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. I want to share with you some observations and thoughts about what's going on in the Middle East and the region. Now for years, even decades, the news from the Middle East was dominated and overshadowed by always centered around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, based on the assumption that this was at the heart of all the ills in the Middle East. However, the wave of unprecedented revolts in Arab countries in the region over the last couple of years has really exposed how false and superficial this view was. Because if anything, what we have seen in the last couple of years is the rot in these various societies, and specifically how many of these countries have for decades been ruled by corrupt dictatorial regimes which have prevented and suppressed the personal freedom and the potential for the economic development of their people. And indeed, even before the revolts in the Arab countries, many autocratic and dictatorial Arab regimes in the Middle East simply used the always simmering and sometimes explosive Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a distraction for their own bungled, corrupt leadership and failed policies. So it was great to say, oh, I'm a great friend of the Palestinians, but meanwhile their people were starving. But all that mattered is what they said on TV and what was broadcast, for example, on Al Jazeera. Indeed, for years, many of these leaders just used support of the Palestinians to galvanize support for themselves. Certain over the weapons, the chemical weapons that are located in Syria, and what's going to happen to that? You know, in the civil war that's going on there, nobody knows. And you have various rebel groups, some of whom are jihadists and some of whom are less, and it's mayhem. And then you have Lebanon on Israel's northern border. And what's happening in Lebanon? You have Hezbollah effectively running the show there. Hezbollah, which is getting weapons from Iran, tens of thousands of rockets, which they, in previous times, fired nonstop at Israel. But it's not just Israel that's concerned about this, because it's a regional threat. And as if the situation wasn't really bad enough, on top of all of these, you have the Iranian nuclear threat. It's not just Israel that's concerned about the nuclear-armed Iran. All the moderate Arab countries in the region are deathly scared over a nuclear-armed Iran. This would be a game changer. If Iran develops a nuclear weapon, it's not only that they can use it, but they could sell it to their proxies, they could give it to their proxies, or they could sell it to anyone on the black market. Israel left the Gaza Strip completely in 2005, Hamas took over, they ousted the Fatah people, and now the brunt of terrorism comes from the Gaza Strip, and until this day, it's a problem. Because why? Because thousands of rockets and missiles have been fired from the Gaza Strip to borderline and beyond borderline communities in Israel. Because Hamas is still committed to Israel's destruction. They don't want to talk peace. They don't want to recognize the state of Israel. They don't want to accept past peace agreements. In fact, if you Google Hamas's charter, you can see quite clearly that they advocate unequivocally the destruction of the state of Israel. So, in general, Israel as a democratic state does not, for example, go about and declare its intention, to wipe another country off the face of the earth. Peace. Well, if we can't reach like an end-of-days solution, let's at least improve the day-to-day conditions. Let's make it better, the conditions of the Palestinians in the West Bank, so that they can see that they should do business with us and that they shouldn't be radical. And that has worked surprisingly well. Not saying that that's the end-all and that's the solution to everything, because clearly it is not. But in the interim, we've seen positive momentum on that side. The Arabs in Jerusalem and the Arabs in the West Bank are watching TV. They're seeing what's going on and all the killing and all the murder that's going on in the region. And they see the conditions that they have, and they see also that there is this opportunity, for an economic boom, for tourism, that with everything that's going on, and despite everything that's going on, there is a robust high-tech industry in Israel. You've probably heard of this. Amazing startups in Tel Aviv. And I think that Israel lists the second largest number of companies on NASDAQ of any international, any country around the world. Tourism in Israel last year was at an all-time high because with relative stability in the region, people started coming back, and the holy city and the Holy Land became what it should be, a people open to all faiths and visitors. And it was of interest that actually in Bethlehem on the West Bank, which is under the leadership of the moderate Fatah group, in contrast, of course, to the Gaza Strip, what happened over Christmas? There was not one hotel room available in Bethlehem. Now that's a great sign. Why? Because that's a sign of economic progress and prosperity and tourism returning, and there is a big hotel and tourism boom underway in the city. So such indeed is the complexity of life in Israel. As we see, daily life continues in Israel's thriving and vibrant democracy.
I'm a junior at Ohio State University, and I learned a lot today about Israel's neighbors and the threats that Israel faces.
I believe he is a very dynamic speaker, and I came out of this talk with a lot more information and a lot more perspective with issues revolving around the Middle East and with Israel.
I go to Bellarmine University. I'm a political science major, and I'm really happy that Edgar came. It was a really great talk, and I thought it was really interesting that on top of talking about the terrorist groups and things like that, the things that are all over the news, that it was really great. But he also brought up the positive side, that the commerce, people do still go and visit, and that all the hotels were full, and that's a great thing for Israel. So.